today for the second in a series of 5 Western Governors Drought Forum webinars. Today's webinar is titled Community Outreach and Consumer Technology for Municipal Water Use. I'm Carly Brown, Water Policy Advisor at the Western Governors Association. Just wanted to make a quick note that I am up on the panelist participant list, as is Amy Schweig, who, if you have any questions for technical assistance, please message Amy or call the Western Governors Association at 303-623-9378. Before I introduce our moderator and panelists, I'd like to describe the Western Governors Drought Forum initiative and go over a few logistics for the webinar. First, the Western Governors Drought Forum is the chairman's initiative of Governor Brian Sandoval, the chairman of WGA and the governor of Nevada. Governor Sandoval's vision for this Drought Forum initiative is to create a framework for sharing best practices on drought management and response. So far, we've had a workshop series of 5 different meetings focusing on different economic sectors, and through that series, we were able to identify some common themes across all different economic sectors, and we decided to put together this webinar series in order to investigate those policy-specific or technology-specific topics in further detail. So that is the purpose of today's webinar, to look at community outreach and consumer technology, which was a theme that emerged across several economic sectors in regards to drought. As far as logistics, in just a moment, our moderator, Dave McGimpsey, will begin the discussion and panelist portion of the webinar. Dave is an attorney for Roca Rothgerber, a law firm here in Denver, Colorado, and he's also host of the Water Values podcast. We're very glad to have him on the line today. Dave will introduce the panelists, who then will introduce themselves and their affiliation. And then each panelist will have the opportunity to deliver some brief opening remarks. Dave will ask a few questions of the panelists to begin the discussion, and then after that initial discussion, we'll have a series of question and answer opportunities. So if you have any questions, please send those to me, Carly Brown, listed on the panelist list, in the chat box at the bottom right of your WebEx screen. And please be sure that you're sending them to me and not the host and not Dave. That way that I can get those sent to Dave quickly and make sure that it's easier on him. Right now, all general attendees are on mute, so if you would like to ask a question, please use that written function. A recording of this webinar will be available by Friday of this week, and we'll send around a message letting you know that that recording is up on YouTube. Again, for technical assistance, please contact Amy through the WebEx application or call WGA at 303-623-9378. And with that being said, I would like to introduce our moderator, Dave McGimpsey. Dave?
Hey, thanks very much, Carly, and I'm all for making it easier on me. Really appreciate your comments there. Well, it's great to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our program today. As Carly mentioned, I'm Dave McGimpsey, a Denver-based attorney with Roca Rothgerber, and we're a law firm that has offices throughout the Southwest and Rocky Mountain region. And as Carly also indicated, I'm also host of the Water Values podcast, which I'm sure you all download on multiple devices and listen to every week religiously. So thank you all for attending this webinar. You will not be disappointed with the content you're about to receive. I also want to thank the Western Governors Association for taking leadership on the issue of drought throughout this webinar series and the Drought Forum. You know, lots of organizations talk the talk. WGA is walking the walk. Well, the title of this webinar, as Carly indicated, is Community Outreach and Consumer Technology for Municipal Water Use. This, to me, is one of the more fascinating topics upon which drought touches. Urban water conservation has made dramatic gains incrementally over the past 20-plus years as a conservation ethic has taken root in more and more communities and more people. And the incremental nature of our improved water usage is important to note because these conservation gains have not occurred overnight. They're cultivated and developed over a long period of time. And that conservation ethic has also fostered a number of programs, like programs implementing more efficient water fixtures, either as retrofits or in new construction. And these conservation programs, including the water efficient fixture programs, have helped drive down water usage over time, and these conservation programs need constant attention and tweaking if they're going to be successful. So today we're going to meet some of those people who have nurtured and who are nurturing the conservation ethic behind a lot of these conservation programs. WGA has procured 3 terrific panelists for this webinar, each with unique perspectives on community outreach and consumer technology in a municipal setting to help shine a light on this important and ongoing issue. I'll now ask our presenters to introduce themselves very briefly, less than 30 seconds, essentially telling you who they are, what company they're with, and the perspective that they're representing, and then we'll get started into their presentations. So with that being said, then we'll get into the audience participation segment. So Rob, I'm going to throw it to you now to give your brief introduction.
We're a software company. We're based in the, can you hear me, Dave?
Yep.
Great. We're a software company based just south of San Francisco. Our mission is really to connect end users with water that they're actually using, give them some insight in terms of their true usage, as well as some actionable tips in terms of how to save water.
Terrific. Nicole, how about you introduce yourself?
Good morning. My name is Nicole Seltzer. I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Foundation for Water Education. We are a nonprofit organization based in Denver, and we work statewide in Colorado in order to provide education for our population on water issues, to get people to sort of understand the basics, know how to be involved in making decisions around water, and to help advance the conversation about water in the state.
Fantastic. And Jeff, how about your perspective?
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, thanks, Dave. It's Jeff Tejral from Denver Water. I'm the manager of conservation here, and I'm representing the utility perspective for a very large utility, and our role in engaging all of our customers to use water wisely and be efficient with this precious resource.
Terrific. Well, thanks very much for those brief introductions. Now, Rob will get us started on the actual presentation with his brief presentation on what his company does and how he does community outreach and uses technology. So, Rob, take it away.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, struggling with the mute button here. So again, DropCounter, we are a software company based in Northern California, just south of San Francisco. And again, our mission is to really empower end users with transparent access to their water use information, all on a convenient platform in our mobile apps. And really the genesis moment for DropCounter came about 3 years ago. I really got curious about how much water I used and decided to go looking for answers. And my quest took me to a file cabinet, through reams of paper and old bills, and really tried to parse together how much water I was using. It was in confusing units. I had trouble making sense of it, and I realized here's an opportunity to really deliver convenient access to this information to end users with the end benefit of saving water, saving money, and saving time as well. Next slide, please. So real quick, some big challenges at the local level as well as the global level that we see, and I think most panelists and most attendees recognize as well. Real challenges with respect to increasing population and increased competition for what is already becoming a scarce resource. Layer on that the effects of climate change and the fact that it's going to rain more in some places and less in other places, and that's going to increase competition for some of these main uses of water, not only drinking water, but its application in energy as well as food development. Big challenges for water utilities, and really the biggest one that we see is, most utilities are rooted in sort of an old school approach to customer communication. There's really just a paper bill that is delivered in the mail every few months, and they don't necessarily have modern customer engagement tools in order to communicate and educate their constituents. And big challenges for consumers, and I think that this was borne out in my experience. I basically expect most information, most personal information available to me immediately. And in most cases, I can access that through my phone. And having to root through, old bi-monthly bills that don't necessarily tell me or give me the answers that I need is a major challenge. Next slide. At the same time, we have some significant opportunities, and I'll start with the water utilities. The fact that utilities are rolling out meters to actually measure water usage is really a huge development in this space. And the fact that many utilities are going with best available technology in the form of true smart meters is a huge win. So now this data is becoming available. We have the applications and software to actually make sense of this data and then actually deliver it to consumers again on the platform that they use and prefer, and that's primarily mobile. Next slide. So what did we do? We created what we call a two-sided digital platform, and this is really at its heart about water data analytics and presentment of that data to consumers on one side and utilities on the other side. So again, we have free mobile apps available in the Google Play Store as well as the Apple App Store. This is where consumers go to download these software applications and consume this content. And again, our goal is really to empower these end users through easy access to this information, telling them, in units that they understand, like gallons, how much water they're actually using every day, every week, and every month. So now that we tell folks how much water they actually use, we try to give them some context. So we compare their consumption to a budget that we generate, a specific, unique budget that we develop for them. So we give them some context in terms of are they using more or less than that budget. And beyond that, we leverage behavioral psychology. So we actually show folks how they compare to others like them. And we found this to be a very powerful motivator, the proverbial keeping up with the Joneses. Now that we've given folks some real information and some context, we also help provide direction. So we give them targeted, relevant tips that will help them actually conserve water. And so we also delivered similar analytics and content to the utility staff. So recognizing that they now have a lot of data at their disposal, but perhaps lack an intuitive dashboard to manage that information, we have a similar product that we call DropCounter Clear that suits that purpose. Next slide. So what have we learned? Well, we've learned it's a mobile world, and you can use it to educate and communicate. So 85% of our users are currently exclusively using the mobile app, while the same content is available on the web. We find a very strong consumer preference for mobile in that 85% number. Another interesting insight, 80% of in-app time is spent viewing usage and the context around that usage. How do users compare to a budget, and how do they compare to others? And I think the takeaway here is that people do care, and they're legitimately quite interested in how much water they're using, to the extent that they're checking back in every day and every week to see how they are actually doing. The education doesn't necessarily stop with the end users. Utilities are using DropCounter Clear for insights. They can filter and sort all of their account information to understand who their high users are. And then from there, they can actually conduct targeted outreach through that dashboard, and they can do that in the form of push messages right over the app to their end users or through email. And this is very convenient and concise in terms of delivery of information for consumers. And it's also extremely cost-effective for utilities, especially as you compare it to kind of the old-school approach of paper, which is expensive and requires postage as well. Thanks for a few moments to introduce my perspective. Looking forward to the moderated discussion.
Terrific. Well, Nicole, why don't we go to you next?
Okay. Thanks, Dave. I'll wait for 1 second. There we go. So I'm going to sort of follow up on Robb's presentation and maybe take it up to more of a 25,000 foot view of communication and outreach with people around water resource issues. So just a little bit about the foundation to provide kind of a context for what we do. We are Colorado's water education organization. We are based in Denver. We work statewide. We are 13 years old, and we reach about 50,000 people a year through a variety of programs. For those of you who know about the organization that's in California, the Water Education Foundation, we were modeled after them. They've been around for several decades, and I am unaware of any other organizations like us in the Western United States. And since we have kind of an audience from several states, if anybody else knows of sort of organizations that are similar, I would love to hear about them, because we're trying to sort of share best practices. The Foundation for Water Education in Colorado, we want to see changes in attitudes, values, knowledge, and behavior within the citizens of Colorado. So we use a framework that's up on your screen to kind of guide our program areas, and we ask why we do what we do and not what or how, which is maybe slightly different than what you're going to hear from some of the utilities, because we generally work more broadly than most organizations. Our messages are not limited to water conservation or water quality. Our messages and the content and the educational programs that we put together are really kind of generated in order to make people have these shifts in their attitudes, values, knowledge, and behavior over the course of time. Next slide, please. So we have sort of three areas within which the foundation functions in the state of Colorado. We function as a translator. So water can be a pretty complicated topic in terms of, water law, how it's regulated, how it's administered, who does what. And so we have a variety of programs where we try to explain complex topics simply so that the average user, and we're generally focused on adult audiences, so that the average user can kind of understand what's going on in the state. We do it through engaging mechanisms. We have a host of sort of print publications, online resources, in-person, and web-based content. And then we try to be an approachable entry point for people. So if you become interested in water issues, you can come to us first and get a basic level of knowledge, and then from there start to learn more in different areas. We're an education advocate. So we work with water educators around the entire state of Colorado, many of which work for water providers. Some are other nonprofit organizations. And we foster collaboration to increase the amount of education that goes on in the state. And then we also identify and teach best practices to help strengthen the effectiveness of water education in the state of Colorado. And then finally, we work on advancing the conversation around water. We promote diversity and improve conflict handling skills through professional development and leadership programs. And then we also work to broaden people's networks beyond sort of their echo chamber. So we get people from all over the state together to learn and talk together so that there's a little bit more of an understanding of other people's viewpoints. Next slide, please. So there's a number of roadblocks that we run into, and we'll get into this a little bit more during the Q&A with Dave, but I wanted to lay just a little bit of groundwork that outlines some of the challenges that we see, because I think you'll find that they resonate pretty broadly. The first is sort of cultural shifts. One is the ideological divide that we're seeing, throughout the whole country, but we see it in Colorado as well. And so that top graph is some information from the Pew Research Center from 2014, and it basically shows people's responses to a series of questions that puts them into kind of a consistently liberal or consistently conservative category. And you can see in the last sort of 20 years, we as a country, we've become more divided in our ideological viewpoints. And where that plays out in terms of water, water, in my opinion, should not be a partisan issue. It's not a political issue. But we live in a world where people are increasingly partisan, and so they're going to get their information from trusted sources that generally reflect their views back to them. So our middle ground is shrinking, and there's not really a whole lot as sort of water professionals that we can do about that. And so what's required is that we have to create a reputation that can transcend ideology by providing factual content that appeals to our basic nature as stewards, and content that isn't seen as sort of being partisan in one way or another. And that gets harder and harder to do when you're trying to educate people about sort of use of a scarce resource. And then we're also seeing cultural shifts in terms of how people get their information. The bottom graph is from 2012. Again, it's another Pew Research study. And basically, the world is changing, and the way that we communicate water issues, in my opinion, especially in the state within which I work, I don't think that we've kept up with the changes that we're seeing. And I'm really pleased to see technologies such as DropCounter, as Robb's previous presentation, start to enter the marketplace. But I think in general, we tend to rely on the way that we communicated 10 years ago. We tend to sort of keep doing the same thing just because it's easier, not because it's the best way. And so I think, as a community, we need to start asking ourselves, how do people want to be communicated with, instead of what I think we're asking, which is, what do we want them to know? So we need to start being a little bit more cognizant of the fact that people are getting information differently, and we need to change the way that we do it. Next slide, please. And then finally, we run into this a lot with the people that we work with, especially in some of the sort of smaller and more rural communities, that there's a real lack of specificity in goals around water education. This question of who do you want to reach and for what purpose? And the answer that you'll often get is, well, I want to reach everyone all the time with everything. And frankly, that's not a valid answer. We need to start knowing why and who we're talking to, and then improve our data collection around how they're receiving it, what they think about it, and then analyzing that and using the results to tell a story. We need to start making a case for investment in outreach and communications around water. And so we at the foundation have been working quite a bit on that, and I'll talk a little bit about that during the Q&A. But on the left is just an example of a logic model that we have created for one of our programs, which basically identifies the inputs, outputs, and desired outcomes of one of our specific programs. And we're working with a bunch of people in the state of Colorado to try to get them to think of their communication programs in this way. And then finally, so this data that you're seeing on the right-hand side is from 2008. And in order to really overcome the roadblocks that I just outlined, what we really need to do is increase investment in water communications and education. This data is from a 2008 survey that was done in the state of Colorado. And the take-home for me from that is that 75% of the organizations in our state operate on a budget of less than $25,000 a year for water education. So that is that's almost less than a half-time person. And so we're asking a lot of, the organizations that do this work, and they're not really being given the resources that they need. And so what we need to do is start using modern communication techniques, bridging those ideological divides, and collecting and using data to demonstrate the impact of the work that we do, and then it will be easier to bring in a lot of that investment. So I look forward to digging a little bit deeper into some of these things as we do the moderated conversation a little bit later. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nicole. Now we move on to Jeff. Jeff, can you provide your presentation, please?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yes, this is Jeff. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Hey, thanks, Dave and Rob and Nicole. That was great. Just want to give you guys the utility perspective and kind of start off with who is Denver Water, like what is our overall perspective. We're an older utility. We've been around since 1918. I know that in the western U.S. there are some older that are around. We serve more than 1 million people. That's about a quarter of the state's population. We've also been, charged with reducing our use, and around that 2% of our water used in the actual whole state. I think we can even do more on that. I think we can do a better job of managing our resources than we have in the past. But I think it speaks to that we're doing a good job with a quarter of the state's population and only using 2% of the water that we have here. It's also, important to know that we have a really big watershed. So when you look at all of these things, old system, old infrastructure, big area, lots of people, we're not just a water provider. We're moving into being the manager of a resource, and we really talk about ourselves as being the trusted source on whether that's managing for the watershed, the quality, or how to use that resource. Next slide, please. And much like the other speakers talked about, we have some challenges facing us in the next 50 to 100 years. We know that we have climate change, growth issues, and issues with the Colorado River, something that connects, all of our western states to these rivers that flow through us and through our states from state to state. And we know that, Colorado snowpack is melting an average of 2 weeks earlier because of climate change. We know that climate change means water change for us, and we have to start planning on a less snow, drier conditions, more volatile weather events. We have to start looking at scenario planning because it's our responsibility, not just because it's something that we like to do. We are the managers of this resource. We also know that growth is going to be impacting us both in positive ways and negatively. And when we think of going from 5 million people in Colorado now to possibly 8 million people by 2040, another million of those people are probably moving into the metro area. We need to be able to manage that growth in a way that is sustainable and that is collaborative and is not just about, urban planning or water use policies, but really going to coordinate policies around water use, land use, transportation, energy. And we really do believe that this is a regional collaboration that we need to start having. We also know the Colorado River is where we get 50% of our water from, and it's been experiencing unprecedented droughts in the last few years. And some of these, you go back in the historic record, they go very far back, and we've never experienced some of the really big droughts, at least not yet in our time. And these compacts, these other, curtailments that could be happening, we need to start understanding how that works, and that is also a collaboration that needs to occur. And so when we look at these three big things that are coming at us, we also know we have the local economy, we have other issues that may pop up, but those big ones really drive us to say that we're going to be doing a strategy that's an all of the above strategy, where we talk about reuse of any reusable supply. We're bringing that back into our schools, parks, and industrial areas. New supply where it makes sense, where we really need that reliability. And conservation is where we start first. We want to make sure that we're water efficient before we do anything else. Next slide. So getting deeper into conservation, kind of building off of what Nicole and Robb said, the place we start is education and outreach, and that's really it is something we do for every program all of the time. If you don't start with the why of what you're doing and who should be doing it and why it's helpful to them, you shouldn't be doing rebates, you shouldn't be making rules, and you'll probably have difficulty getting there. And when I think about consumer technology, I think of this as very broad, that the information that Robb is putting out is a consumer technology that helps educate and helps push customers towards rebates. It helps educate them about why rules are important. And we also do, we do thousands of rebates a year for new products, whether that's toilets, urinals, irrigation products, smart controllers, you name it. If there's something out there that's more efficient, we're trying to challenge our customers to get there. Along with that, I think one of the big ones, that middle one, is partnerships. It's like if we're not working with our distributors, our local governments, chambers of commerce, we're not truly managing expectations. We're not communicating to that next level of people that can really impact a broad broad audience out there. And that's where we see people coming into our rebates and incentive programs because they heard it third hand and they understand what's going on. And I think we're going to see that area continue to grow and become not just a partnership of we talked about it, but really how do we challenge ourselves to really be thinking broader about these tie-ins. And we're also looking to always do research and monitor and evaluate our programs. I think it was touched on earlier to where we're always tweaking, we're always looking, how do we have a better program? How do we, from a utility perspective, have the lowest cost, best option for how we manage our resources? And we'll be bringing on new rebates, new educational opportunities all the time. And I think next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about one that we're excited about. And we're working with single-family residential. It's about half of our service area is single-family use. We're also doing the same thing, but I didn't show it up here with multifamily commercial. But out of the drought of 2013, we started using a letter that we'd sent out every month. As the meter was read, we put out a report to our customers. And this is going back to that partnership around education and really communicating what should a customer be using. We know the square footage. We know the consumption of use at the site. We also know kind of the indoor usage that happened throughout the winter. We can give a customer a very good report that says you're using the right amount, that red line and below. You're using too much. When the blue bar goes above, you may have exceeded what you should be doing. Those communications are really key, and that's also how we start getting customers into focused, targeted programs versus general, programs for everyone doing the same thing. And I think that Rob touched on it really well, that it's like if you're a customer, you're expecting a utility to know who you are, what you're doing, and you want to be able to get that information as quickly as possible. Currently, we use AMR technology, and that is basically we read meters once a month. We drive by with a truck. If we would like to get to that point where we can really communicate daily or hourly use, that's a new technology, that's a new investment for us, and it's something that we're actively testing, looking at, and trying to understand how can we bring that on at the lowest cost, best case scenario for all of our customers. And it will truly change how we communicate and how we engage our customers around water use. And give the last slide, I'll just talk a little bit about the results. I think many of you may have seen an article in the Denver Post recently that talked about our indoor use dipped to a 40-year low. We basically used the same amount of water that we did in 2014 December that we used in 1973 in December, while adding 350,000 more customers. And really that's, when you look at that, that tells us that our customers have used new technology, they're paying attention to their water use, and that this is something that is grabbing a hold. Nationwide in the West, it's definitely out there, and that many of our programs have actually helped move customers to this level, and it's something that we look to continue doing. This also talks about our relationship with our customers. We feel that we have built a relationship of being the trusted source. Not to say that we can't do better at that and make sure that we're really giving customers everything and when they need it. That is important to us. But we're also hoping that the next level that is in there, we're going to start talking about efficient use versus just reduction. And that idea of reduction, in our mind and what our customers are telling us, it actually, they think of it as giving something up. It has a certain level of sacrifice to it, whereas efficiency, they feel like that is actually something that, they can live with. We see a lot of our customers coming in around 30 gallons per person per day of indoor. We see a lot of customers at less than 10 gallons per square foot for outdoors. Those things require new technologies, vigilance, communication, education, and an engaged customer to get that place. But I think those things will continue to see that trend line. If you see those big blue bars, I think we can continue to move that downward to a sustainable level as we add in the next 1 million people in our service area. And with that, I will throw it back to Rob and Dave and Nicole.
All right. Hey, well, thanks very much, Jeff, Nicole, and Rob. Those were fantastic presentations. I think we learned a lot through those. We'll start the moderated portion of our program now, and I really want to kind of frame the municipal water use issue. And Jeff, I'll throw this to you since you're the utility. What, in your experience, what does municipal water use look like? Because we've talked a lot about residential. What's your experience with municipal water use in general?
Yeah, good question. Municipal water use is kind of, you could say it's about anything that happens in a town, village, or city. Residential is what we generally think of, and that's indoor and outdoor for irrigation. But it's also our breweries, it's our businesses, hotels, restaurants. We have bottling plants in our service area. So it's a wide range that it can be used for, and it goes, into cooling. It goes into being used for industrial cleaning. All of those uses are captured when we say, municipal use.
Okay, I'll throw it to you, Rob. What's your experience with DropCounter and the utilities you've worked with? Are they primarily targeted toward the residential users, or are there commercial users that are looking at this technology that you're using?
I think it's all over the map, Dave. I think that primarily our product is designed for residential engagement. So that's the way it's being applied to date with some of our utility partners. That said, there's utility for sure in terms of distilling information into a usable form and delivering insights and creating action at the commercial level as well. So we have had some conversations with big commercial entities in some of our partner service areas.
Okay. Nicole, you made a very good point that there's a lot of complexities around water, and you make an effort to communicate those simply. What types of outreach have you found to be most effective in getting the word out about water usage?
Yeah. So Dave, I think there is no silver bullet in my opinion. In my opinion, what you need is a mix of different kinds of programs that reach across the sort of ideological and socioeconomic boundaries. So you need a mix of programs that are, on the ground, that make a connection between people's everyday lives and the different sort of management styles of, for water. You need to create a sense of personal responsibility through interaction and experience. So those, getting people together, having conversations, seeing the infrastructure, understanding how it sort of plays into the water they get in their homes. That's very important. But you also need to have sort of bite-sized information that people can easily access when they have, 5 minutes and they want to sort of learn something about water, and you need to sort of push that out as well as pull people in. And then you also need, in-depth information for people. I kind of call it the difference between like the browsers versus the researchers. And you've got to have information that's bite-sized and quick and easy to digest. And then you also need to have sort of long-form journalism or more sort of in-depth research reports that people can really get into if they find something that piques their interest. And so I don't think there is sort of one program that works best. I think you have to hit people on multiple levels.
That's a great point. I think that there's segmentation within the customer base, and each one could need a different type of content to get to them about their water usage. So, Jeff, what's been your experience at Denver Water with that?
I think I agree completely with what Nicole just said, that market segmentation is so important, and the more we work with, communicating efficient use to customers, we find out more and more about how to do that better. And a good example of that is we've had a water budget program where we communicate how much is an efficient use for these larger HOAs, community associations, and parks, schools, districts like that are big irrigators. as we've set that up, we found that, it's like some of them, this report worked really well for because it really hit their needs, whereas other ones, because they were a smaller area, they had different complexities of indoor use with a big cooling tower or something or industrial process. This report didn't work very well when we're having to rethink how we communicate to that customer type and really get that product to be what is going to help them get where they're going. It's difficult, and you don't know what you don't know until you actually start working with the customer and figuring it out.
Jeff, Robb, do you have any thoughts on customer segmentation and communication to them?
Well, I think, a lot of the market research we've done in the form of survey work with end users, there are a few themes that come out. Certainly lack of knowledge in terms of how much water individuals are using is a consistent one. People just don't really have the connection to how much water they're using. And without knowing that, it's difficult to really identify ways to conserve. And so if you ask folks to guess how much water they think they use, they consistently guess about 50% of their actual usage, which is part of the problem right there. And I guess furthermore, if you ask them to guess how they compare to others like them, fundamentally everyone thinks that they're better than average. And this is an element of behavioral psychology that we've tried to deploy in the DropCounter product.
Sure. So when we come to conservation programs that are implemented, Jeff, you indicated a number of elements for a conservation program, and rebates seem to be a pretty consistent thing. What are some issues that surround rebates for utilities to consider when they're thinking about a rebate program?
Yeah, that's a great question. Rebates, when we look at them, there's primarily two reasons you'd want to do a rebate. One, you're trying to incentivize, getting your marketplace, your actual what is being sold out there in the marketplace to change. And if you can change that marketplace, everybody else that comes in after you stop doing the rebate will probably get that better new product that wouldn't have been there. The other one is you're trying to increase how quickly people adopt these new technologies. So you want to look at how soon is something coming to you, like how soon is this horizon of where you really need these either reductions or efficiencies. So you would want to set up your rebate program to get those, and you'd start having to look at your service area and know how old is your plumbing fixtures because of age of housing. You want to know how big is your use for outdoor irrigation, those kinds of things, and also knowing what's acceptable in your community. You have to do a lot of outreach, as Robb talked about. You need to do surveys and really get out and say, what's acceptable, what's not within our community.
And I think that really touches on a thread that ran through all three presentations, and that is really, customer engagement. DropCounter engages with customers through putting the usage right there. Nicole really emphasized customer engagement, and you're emphasizing customer engagement. Nicole, I'll put it to you. What do you see as effective strategies for engaging that customer on water usage?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I'm going to sort of rely on something that is kind of fundamental to, like the environmental education profession, which is something called Bloom's taxonomy. And if you don't know what that is, basically it's kind of a pyramid that was created in the 1950s that defines the process of learning. And basically what it says, and you can Google Bloom's taxonomy and kind of see what it looks like, but basically it's a pyramid that basically says you need to remember a fact before you can understand its implications and then apply that understanding to modify your behavior. Right, so there's a series of steps that you have to go through in order to get somebody from not knowing something to knowing something to understanding its implications and then to applying it to their life. And ultimately, in this context, we're talking about influencing their behavior around, their consumption of water. And so when you design educational programs, you have to sort of think through each of those steps and say, okay, how do we introduce basic information that people can access easily and remember? And then once they have the information and we know that they can sort of understand it, how do you get them to care enough to sort of apply it to their life? And how do you arm them with the facts of, or the different behavior changes that you're actually looking for? And those would be in the form of, like rebates and tearing out your lawn or putting in an automated sprinkler timer, and so it's this whole kind of series of actions that you have to go through from basic awareness to behavior change.
Mm-hmm. And Robb, you bring into this conversation the behavioral psychology. You indicated, hey, this is the proverbial keeping up with the Joneses during your presentation. What type of water savings are you typically seeing from year to year through utilities that are using your product?
Well, it's early days for us, Dave, so we don't have any results that we've released so far, but this has been shown to be successful, especially in the energy space. And often folks see about a 5% reduction in energy or water just through making that information available to end users, and again, giving them some context and some motivation to keep up with others like them.
Okay. And one of the things you indicated with DropCounter is that it provides information in ways customers can understand, specifically in units of consumption. I've been billed before in CCFs, and I have no idea what a CCF is. But how does that engagement with the customer in terms of providing information in an understandable format? How have you seen that really help move the product along and further customer education about this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's one of the first reactions we get from folks when they actually sign up for the service and they can see how much they use day on day in real gallons. I mean, the response is, wow, I had no idea how much water I used. And even in my particular case, I mean, I'm on DropCounter. I see my hourly water usage data, and I took a look at my daily trend and saw a big spike at 4 a.m. and said, wow, why am I using 700 gallons at 4 a.m. in the morning? And with a little sleuthing, understood that was when my sprinklers went off. And so that definitely changed my behavior, just having access to that information and a little bit of insight from the logic behind the app.
Okay. Well, we'll move on to some listener and attendee questions. The first one is for Jeff, and it's to what factors do you attribute the dip in single-family household water use?
Yeah, I think the factors are, kind of threefold, and number one is new technology. I mean, we're seeing, if you look back to the 1980s, we had like a flush volume for a standard toilet was 5 gallons. It moved down to 3.5, then down to 1.6. We now are rebating for less than 1 gallon per flush on a toilet. So that's a really good example of, and that's about a quarter of the water use at a typical home is for toilet flushing. You reduce that from 5 gallons to less than 1, so 20% of the use, but still getting a good product out of it, good use. The other one is that we have more people paying attention. That the idea that water is important, I think, is much more prevalent today than it was 20 years ago. And that goes to the education, that goes to what the news has been saying. The droughts actually help us quite a bit, getting some attention on this. And the last one is I think that the utility that we have actually put in, programs to actually get things to happen. And we've started to manage demand side reductions versus just saying that's a thing that happens. So I think we're seeing this happen across the Western U.S., across the country, and it can probably lead back to those three factors for the most part.
Okay. A question for Robb. There are various companies like yours that are customizing utility records and bills to the customers. Doesn't your app only work if DropCounter has a contract with the customer's utility?
That is true. So, we function through partnership with the water utility, at which point we take the meter data and the customer data that they have in-house, and then we analyze that and present it, again, back to the customer. So the questioner is correct. I mean, they can only connect with their information if we have an existing partnership with their utility. That said, we have an interesting feature on the app, if you were to download it, that allows end users who don't see their utility represented as a prospective partner. It's an opportunity for them to actually contact their utility and request more granular and convenient access to their information.
Got it. And there was another question for you. Where are you getting the data to make the comparison of homes similar to yours? Are you using government databases or property size and census information?
Sure. So we mine a lot of existing data sets with respect to parcel size, property size, and then when an individual signs up for the app, they go through a simple 3-question sign-up process. One of those questions is related to household occupancy, and that's how we base our indoor water budgeting number, as well as use that to base our comparison to others.
Sure. We have one for Nicole. Has the Colorado Foundation for Water Education used games and game theory to build or promote water education, either with adult or with student populations?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have not, and that kind of goes back to the point that I made initially, that I think that, you know, at least in Colorado, I think we're somewhat behind the curve in terms of using technology in water communications and education. I know a couple of people in Colorado that have started down the path of development of some of the like gamification apps and web-based programs. We have not gotten into that yet, but it's definitely on my radar screen, and it's something that, you know, we're talking about in terms of next steps for our education programs.
Great. We have one for Jeff, but I think, Nicole, you might also weigh in on this after Jeff has spoken. How are you educating or working with developers building new housing developments?
Oh, that is a very timely question. We're actually working on that. I'm in a week-long meeting discussing our role in new development practices. How do we bring on new types of development that we've never seen before? These are denser, bigger houses at times, very close together, sometimes stacked, sometimes side by side, and how do we get those to be the most water use efficient they can be? And some of that is to start looking at educating is our first one, to say, why is building with water use efficiency important to the developer? I mean, number one for us is to say the less water these customers use, if they come on efficient, that's more development that we can do down the road. And it'll keep your rates lower, it'll keep your tap fees lower, and I think in the end we're going to look at how do we incentivize these groups to come in, a developer to say, we're going to build really great product, really dense, very high water use efficient, and how do we incentivize that on the tap fee? How do we incentivize that some way to make sure that the best stuff out there really is going to shine?
Okay. Nicole, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. So we're doing a couple of things right now that kind of have to do not necessarily with the development community itself, but with those that sort of have regulatory or decision-making oversight of the development process. So we are working with a lot of the county commissioners and the planning departments on the Front Range. We're developing a new educational program that's kicking off in April that's specifically geared toward those individuals, and to try to get people to sort of understand the nexus between land use planning and water resources management and how different development styles can impact water use. And so we're working on right now a series of educational programs starting in June, or really starting in April, and then those will roll out through the summer and the fall. That'll be specifically focused on sort of land use planning and the nexus with water supply. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. We'll have a lot coming out within the next 6 months.
Okay, another question for Jeff. How has total municipal water production at Denver Water changed? And a related question, are cities in the Southwest concerned about economic growth being curtailed by limited water supplies?
Yeah, I mean, how has the overall, like the question is total treated demand, like for?
Well, I think they're talking total water production.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, total water production has, I mean, if you look back, I mean, every year is slightly different because we have irrigation use that, is sometimes it's very hot and dry, so it spikes up. Sometimes it's cold and rainy, so it comes back down. But if you look back, our general trend from 1975 or so, 1980 to 2015, we've been on a slight decrease on overall water demand through that time period, even as population has added in 350,000 more people. I now wish I had put that on the slideshow so people could see it, but it's certainly out and available, I think, even on our website. But we've seen, a fairly good trend of moving down, and specifically since our drought of 2002 was really our high point. 2000, 2001 were the most water that we ever produced, and we have not gone back to that for the last 15 years.
Okay, and our final question is for Robb. What is it about an app that is particularly powerful for water users? Can this or other apps help users better understand the water system as a whole, or just their own use?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think, just going back to the ubiquity of mobile and the fact that 75% of Americans now own a smartphone, and that is really the medium through which most folks interact with information, personal or otherwise. And so I think that, that really speaks to our thesis that, delivering this information via mobile is really the way not only to drive awareness with respect to conservation and personal use, but really drive action, making water use personal through that connection with the end user's phone.
Terrific. Well, I want to thank you, the panelists, Robb, Nicole, and Jeff, for a terrific job today. And it's been a great pleasure hosting and moderating this webinar. So I'll throw it back to Carly for some final housekeeping. But thank you very much. We've learned a lot today and really appreciate everyone's time. And thank you for your attendance.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much for moderating this discussion, and also thanks to Jeff, Nicole, and Robb for your great thoughts and input. We are really pleased to have you on this webinar. Just a couple of announcements for those of you on the line. We are going to have 3 more webinars. The next one on March 11th is on drought data and technology. March 25th, managing forest health for water resources. And April 8th, why variation in hydrology and legal structures means that drought looks different across the West. So all of those, you can find out more information at westgov.org, and we'll have recordings of each of those webinars. The recording of this webinar and a download of the slides will be available on our website, and I'll send out an email to everyone who's registered on this Friday, and we'll have a link to that YouTube video and the slides and any other follow-up information that the panelists choose to share with you. You can also, at westgov.org, view case studies and best practices that we're collecting as part of this part of the Drought Forum initiative, and we encourage you to send any of your own case studies or resources that you'd suggest to be featured on the website to me at cbrown@westgov.org. Again, thank you all so much, and hope to see you in 2 weeks.